Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'll give this a minute to load. Everyone join in. Right. Thank you everyone for joining. We're going to give everyone a couple more minutes so we can let this load and trickle in. All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abby Salazar. I am with Wake Research. Thank you all so much for joining our webinar about COVID-19 vaccines. We are so happy that you were able to join us, and we are also very grateful for all of our panelists for taking the time out of their day to talk to you. First things first, we do recommend switching your view to speaker view so you can hear who's talking. And we're actually recording this webinar for future viewing. The link to view the recording will be sent to the email that you used to register for the webinar. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start off by having the panelists introduce themselves. And we are going to start off with Po. Po is the, over here. All right, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Po-Shen Loh. I'm actually a mathematician, but these days I've also been working on COVID-19 because the area of mathematics that I work on is network theory, the study of all of these relationships. Actually, I was more known before for education. I'm also the national coach of the Olympic math team for the United States. But after figuring out that this area of math could be used to try to help people avoid getting sick, we actually created NOVID, which was the first app that used the network to allow people to preemptively find out if disease was coming towards them from far away. And this is actually fundamentally different from contact tracing. So actually we realized that instead of making a contact tracing app, it might be useful to introduce the first network radar in the world for avoiding sickness. But I'm happy to be here around all of these esteemed colleagues to learn about what everyone else is doing too.
Thank you so much, Po. We're excited to have you. Next, we will move on to Commissioner Cervania.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to be included on this very awesome panel. Like, such an honor to be amongst leaders in COVID research and medical research and just community outreach in general. My name is Maria Cervania. I'm based here in Wake County. I'm a Wake County commissioner, but professionally, I'm a trained epidemiologist, and my last job was being a biostatistician. So yeah, I'm here. I don't know where our audience is, but I want to welcome everybody beyond this panel anytime to contact me if you have any questions about our COVID outreach and vaccines and testing included. This is always constantly changing. It's so very fast moving day to day. So please feel free to contact me, and I'll send my information along later in this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Now we will move on to Dr. Nicole Swiner.
Hi, guys. I'm the only one without a filter, but at least it's not a cat. Or background or whatever. I am Dr. Nicole Swiner, and I am a wife and a mom living through this pandemic along with you guys. But my daytime gig is as a full-time family physician. So as a family doctor, definitely have been on the front lines of this thing that we've been battling since the beginning, and we'll continue to do so. And through Wake Research, I've been able to help educate the community and be a patient advocate for the vaccines and the vaccine trials that have been occurring and trying to explain things in layman's terms and make sure that we are including diverse populations and including access for everyone so we can all move forward throughout this pandemic. So my clinic here is Durham Family Medicine. We're in Durham on Broad Street. So, you know, if you have questions or concerns or you're looking for family care, please reach out.
Awesome, Dr. Swiner, we're so happy to have you. And last but not least, we have Aubrey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aubrey Foray. I'm a clinical research professional, and I work as the Director of Clinical Operations for Wake Research in our North Carolina region. My background is actually public safety. I am still certified as a paramedic and work as such, always ready to respond to people's most urgent needs. And a lot of that has translated to this pandemic, especially from the aspect of research. Our company has been on the front line, so to speak, of this research effort in enrolling participants and watching them very closely to see whether or not this drug or these drugs that we're working on are safe and effective. So that is what we are accomplishing now and that we continue to work on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Aubrey. We're so excited to have you. Now, before we get started, I do want to make the disclaimer that this webinar is not supposed to replace or provide medical advice. So if you have any questions about how this COVID vaccine could affect you, could affect any sort of medical conditions that you may have, we do ask that you please consult with your primary care physician for more details about how this vaccine can affect you. All right, everyone ready? Let's get started and let's learn about this. Now, first off, we know that this pandemic, we are reaching this year mark, and we know that there's a lot of uncertainty in the air as far as kids going back to school, teachers getting vaccinated. So my first question is actually going to be for Po, since he is an educator. What are some things that parents or teachers can do to support children's social, emotional, and educational development during this pandemic?
Wow. Well, I'm actually also a parent, so I see this myself. I mean, we have 3 kids. One of my kids is in 9th grade, one is in 7th grade, and one's in 1st grade. And across all of this, you can see that Zoom doesn't quite replace high school, let's just say. At least I grew up in America. I went to high school in America. The high school experience in America is not easily facilitated on Zoom. And because of the work that we do, because NOVID is a radar that can help people avoid disease, we've also been talking to people in schools. And I've seen newsletters talking about how prom this year is going to need to be social. How do you run prom on Zoom? You can't. Right. So what I'm trying to say is, as a parent and as an educator, I think it's extremely important to be sensitive to the fact that the mental states, the psychological states of all of our children are actually quite fragile right now. Now, things that one can do, like from the education perspective, I always, as an educator, I actually encourage everyone, if you're able to participate more in the class, at least make it feel a little bit more like you're not just talking, well, having somebody else talk to you and nobody being there. You can simulate some of that social experience. But I think the other thing that makes me very enthused, because of the topic of this is on vaccines, I'm very enthused that we're finally getting some of these powerful tools that we could potentially use to return our entire society back to normal. And so I think what I'll say is, I would strongly encourage, since the focus of this is on vaccines, I'll strongly encourage everyone, if you can get vaccinated when you have the opportunity to do so, get it as soon as possible. It's not only for you, it's also for your children.
Thank you, Po. And I think that you can provide a little more insight about, if you can get the vaccine, you should get it. I think that your app NOVID, could you talk to us a little bit more about how your app works and some things that you found that may be a little bit surprising, especially in the social aspect?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I didn't say too much about this app before because I wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to say what they were doing. But actually, the reason I'm working on this, I'm a scientist, and the reason I'm working on this is we've actually discovered an entirely new modality to controlling disease that works even when there isn't a vaccine. Notice that I said even if there isn't, because we're lucky that in COVID we're getting things under control. But what about the next pandemic? That's sort of what we do. I'm also a math professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and what we do in research is we try to think of what to do for the next time. But actually, even for COVID now, the reason why we are talking to schools is because everyone's trying to think, how do you deal with it if a case arrives? And a lot of times the response is reactionary. The case is here. Here are the people who have been around the case. Attempt to remove them as quickly as possible from the community so they don't infect other people. What we came up with is something very different. What we made is a radar. So whenever there's a case, we actually anonymously tell everybody else how far away the case was, where the twist is you measure the distance by counting relationships. That's actually why this is revolutionary. Everyone has been thinking about measuring distances, 6 feet, 15 minutes. What we said is, how about we measure the number of degrees of Kevin Bacon, if that makes sense. But we measure it automatically with an app where you're in the same classroom, period 1 with these people, sitting near them. And then in period 3, you're in that other group with these people. And by switching the way of measuring distance to the network, now it's actually useful. I can actually explain to you something that happened at a university where we were deploying this. A university student told me about a week ago. He said, NOVID saved my life. I said, no, we don't do that. But you're exaggerating. But what he said was, the NOVID radar told me that 2 relationships from me, there was somebody with COVID. I was going to go and hang out maybe for lunch with somebody else. That person checked his radar. It was 1 relationship from him. So we chose not to hang out and have lunch. You know, having lunch is hard to do with a mask. What this is all about is the person who saw the radar signal 2 away, they weren't in any danger directly yet, in the sense that they hadn't been exposed, but the radar let them avoid an exposure and preemptively avoid getting exposed. So anyway, that's the interesting thing that we have come up with. And my job right now, my goal right now is to try to bring this concept of a radar into public awareness as soon as possible, because it's just a new way of fighting a disease. Combine that with vaccines, and then you hopefully will be able to put an end to this pandemic as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Po. That's really great information, and it's really interesting how much our technology has progressed in recent years, especially during this pandemic. Now, you mentioned something about going back to normal. Now, this next question is going to be directed towards Dr. Swiner. So, Dr. Swiner, I know that you are also, not only are you a doctor, you are also a mother. Now, do you have any advice to parents or teachers that are joining us today as far as transitioning back? We may not know when we're going back to school, but are there things that we can do today to prepare for that transition so children aren't just shocked with the sheer volume of socialization all at once?
Right. Literally, as I was getting ready to get on this call, I had a patient visit with a teacher who's going back, and thank God, you know, prior to the vaccines coming out and now being available to educators and to teachers, she was thinking about resigning. You know, she said, I'm 69 years old, I'm high risk, I can't put myself at risk. I love my students, but I can't do it. But thank God we've been able to get her at least the first shot of the vaccine, and hopefully the second shot by the time she goes back into the classroom. The other visit, the visit right before this, was an 8-year-old going back next week with ADHD. And so mom is already nervous, not only about potential risks of exposures to COVID, but then how her 8-year-old is going to adjust. He's already saying, I don't want to go back, you know, and already a little stressed about that. So what we've been trying to do on the medical side is, of course, talk to people, you know, get it out. Let's have a discussion about it. You know, when I talked to the 8-year-old, I was able to tell him, well, guess what? You know, your teachers can get shots now, right? And he was like, oh, that makes me feel better. And I'm like, well, guess what? The numbers are starting to come down a bit. He's like, okay. So that relieved some of his anxiety about COVID part. Now the mental health piece and the socialization piece is definitely going to be a more complicated issue. But what mom was trying to do with that 8-year-old was get in touch with his guidance counselor now. She wants to hopefully have a meeting with his guidance counselor, and we are referring him for therapy, you know, for other reasons. But during those sessions, they also can talk about, okay, so how's it going to feel when we go back in the classroom, and what can we look forward to? And then if there are some issues, what can we try to prevent? So I think just having those conversations and clearly having a great relationship with your primary care, your pediatrician when it comes to your kids is going to be an integral part of getting back into the system, or getting back into the school system. And, you know, just trying to be as transparent as possible. I told him, yes, I have a 2nd and a 4th grader at home, and I still don't know if I'm sending them back, you know, and I feel nervous too. And let's have a discussion about that. So I think trying to be as open and transparent as possible, and then try to get the help of your medical and mental health professionals ahead of time, hopefully will be helpful.
Those are all really great suggestions. Thank you so much, Dr. Swiner. And, you know, we're talking a lot about how we're preparing for things to go back to normal. But of course, before we do that, you know, vaccinations need to get rolled out. People need to be safe, or people need to feel safe about getting the vaccine. So this next question is actually for Aubrey. Can you talk to us a little bit about the clinical trials that Wake Research has been involved in, and how can we tell that steps weren't skipped to make, you know, a lot of people say this vaccine was rushed. What would you say to those people who have apprehensions about, you know, the clinical trials being rushed?
Yeah, that's a very common question nowadays. We've not seen this type of response, but we've not been in this situation before in many generations. And so first, I'd like to establish that there are principles, there are guidelines that we have to adhere to in clinical research. One such set of principles is called good clinical practices, and that has not changed or been altered in any way during the clinical trial process during the rollout of these vaccines. And so that's very key, because these practices, these good clinical practices, were initiated as a response to different practices over the years of clinical research, things that resulted from World War II, from Tuskegee, and many other unfortunately negative experiences that we've learned from. And these are international guidelines that are adhered to. So that has to be recognized, that the principles and the guidelines on how to conduct research have not changed. But in addition to that, there are regulatory bodies that oversee the conduct of clinical trials. These are third party, so to speak, independent bodies of individuals, review boards that monitor every aspect of the clinical trial, how the protocol is designed, how the subjects are incorporated in the study, what their rights are, how they are monitored for safety. And so these third-party companies or review boards are there for that purpose, to really closely monitor the process. And so although, you know, the term of Operation Warp Speed has identified the velocity of how we are moving, the principles and the safety measures are still there. In fact, every study that has EUA approval or that we're currently conducted has already been through rigorous phase 1 trials, right? So there's different phases to clinical research. And that very first phase is the safety and tolerability of the investigational product. And so, for example, I'll take Pfizer. They started with just 200 people. You want a relatively smaller group of individuals. That was across 5 different countries, so a very diverse trial. And you test in that small population with very close monitoring by professionals like myself, ready to respond if there's any adverse effect. And then slowly, as the data is collected, we move into the next phase of trial. And so ongoing monitoring is still being conducted for all subjects that have enrolled in these clinical trials. Very small amount of serious adverse events. We recognize that people may have allergies and things like that, but these are things that you can experience, of course, with any medication. But we're very vigilant in monitoring our patients very carefully after each dose, and subsequently after that by means of remote monitoring too.
Thank you, Aubrey. And a follow-up question to that is, if someone is a part of a clinical trial, when will they know if they got the placebo or the vaccine? Will they get the vaccine? And if a booster shot is needed, will they get it through the study as well?
Okay, it's a set of great questions, actually. The answer in short is, if you participate in a clinical trial for COVID vaccine at Wake Research, I can't speak for the protocols that we're not working on, but you will receive the drug. We have a crossover design for the studies that we're working with. And so essentially, once the drug is EUA approved, those who are on placebo will get the study drug. No, that's for the current studies that we're conducting between Pfizer, Moderna. Many of those individuals have already been unblinded and dosed with study medication. The Johnson & Johnson studies up and coming, as well as the NOVID trial. We are working on a new study where the crossover design, so again, the patient gets study drug, the vaccine, placebo initially, either or, but then eventually after a certain period of time, and we have the appropriate amount of immunogenicity samples, will cross over, and then the patient will either get placebo or the vaccine. And so that study is up and coming. We'll be running that in the next week or so, but every trial that we're running, you will eventually get the drug. As far as a booster shot, I do know Pfizer is looking at doing that for their trial. I don't believe the protocol has rolled out yet, so that's preliminary. But if there's a need for it, they will no doubt get it in the time frame of the 24 months that they're in the clinical trial.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aubrey. Now, this next question, I think it's going to be directed towards Maria, but it's pretty open-ended. Now, one big common question that we have, a little background, the registrants were able to pre-submit these questions. One of the most common questions we've had is, if you've already had COVID-19, do you still need to get the vaccine, or should you still get the vaccine? And I'll open that to Maria, but anyone else, of course, can jump in as well.
Oh, I wasn't prepared to answer that question, but you all can correct me because you all probably know much better. But I would probably still encourage people to get the vaccine. I mean, there's a number of variances that are happening, and who knows, like what kind of COVID-19 that you had originally had been exposed to, but yeah, so I see a lot of nodding of heads to where these current series of vaccines have been able to be protective against the several variances that have been coming out.
Thank you, Maria. Aubrey or Dr. Swiner, do you have anything to add as far as once someone has gotten COVID, should they get the vaccine? Could they get the vaccine?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So yes, Commissioner Cervania was correct. Yes, you should definitely still be encouraged to get the vaccine, excuse me, despite having the infection at some point. A couple of different reasons, just from a family doc perspective. Once you have been infected, like she mentioned, you don't know which one you were infected with, and there are now new variants out there that we're currently doing research on, and Aubrey can definitely make some comments about that, but we're looking into those. The vaccines that are out have also been shown to protect from the variants as well in some amount. And y'all can correct me on that too. But the even more important piece is, once you've been infected, I think we're saying that there's some immunity that comes with that. So if you were infected in July, you could have some protection, right? Your body has built up some antibodies, but that only lasts for a couple of months, we think. So then the reset button has been pressed. You're now, unfortunately, able to get reinfected. So that's another reason for going ahead and getting your vaccine. The last thing I'll say about that is, I've had some patients who had been infected and then asked, well, I want to get the shot, but when is it safe to do so? Originally, we were saying to wait 90 days. Now we're saying after 30 days, or even sooner than that, you can get the vaccine. But when you go to get signed up and you're scheduled to get your vaccine, you certainly can have that conversation with the person that's giving it to you. So we now know that we're not required to wait as long as we originally thought after infection to get the shot if you want it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping in, Dr. Swiner. Now, again, Maria, this is more so a logistical question. Now, we do have attendees that are joining us from all over the country. So I do want to make the disclaimer that, with this question, this may not be 100% relevant to all of our attendees. Your mileage may vary. This may vary from state to state or county by county. But in general, Commissioner Cervania, where can people get information about these things? How do I get the vaccine? How do I know what group I'm in?
So just an overall, I do want to say, vaccines are slowly rolling out, and that we all need to really be super patient about, our time, because there's so many people who are in the eligible groups here in Wake County. We we have group 1 and group 2, and just started today registering group 3A, which includes our educators or our school and childcare workers. And we still don't have enough. We vaccinated 30,000 people, but we have 1 million people here in Wake County, and we've already been vaccinating for 2 or 3 weeks now. So, I sense with colleagues that I work with before, and who are all over the country, that we're all in the same place, that we need to remind our people to be patient, because the vaccines can't become are still just trickling in. But I'm hopeful in terms of finding more information. A lot is dictated by our federal government in terms of provision of funding for COVID and in our vaccines and rollout. So, we need to really be vigilant about getting information at that point. But really, in state to state, there's a different approach. And, honestly, the boots on the ground are local. So I encourage people to go to their state website when it comes to their state health department COVID website, and go to your local county. I mean, it's different in, Dr. Swiner's in Durham and I'm in Wake, and the approach is completely different. And so I really do encourage people for the day-to-day when it comes to testing and vaccines to go to your local county website. And it's usually your county website /COVID-19. To find out what group you're in. I know here in Wake County, actually there's a state website. What was it called? Your spot, your shot. And it'll go through a series of questions to ask you, your demographics, what you do for a living, your age, and then it'll let you know what group you're in. And I could put that in the chat as we go along. But yeah, I can't speak for other states, but I know here in North Carolina, it's very, very, very good. And if you're eligible, if you're in group 1 or 2, people will, provide more information, or there be I know that there's been outreach towards you too after the website identifies you as eligible.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Cervania. We know that there are a lot of confusing things happening, but this is a great place to start. Start with your state website. I'm sure everyone can just go on their search engines and type in their state and COVID vaccine and get more resources over there. Thank you so much. This next question is going to be really more so open-ended. Right now, we're seeing a couple different, we have the Pfizer vaccines and the Moderna vaccines. How long after the first dose should you get the second dose? Will it be ineffective if you do not get the second dose in time? And I'll open this to any panelists that may have the answer to this question. And Aubrey, yes.
I'm gonna take a portion of this and I'll see if some of our medical providers can finish it. For the Pfizer vaccine, it's more or less 21 days in between the 2 doses. And then for the Moderna vaccine, you're looking at 1 month is what the label says. Generally, that'll translate to about 28 days. What's the effects if you don't adhere to that schedule? Well, don't take that chance. Just adhere to it. That's what's been tested. We talked about clinical trials in the process. So all the data we have is based on that. So don't, be a variant of that. With that said, in any circumstance, unforeseen occurrences befall us all. In any circumstance, you certainly wouldn't want to do it sooner than that window, right? So if it's just a few days after, that's certainly better than doing it sooner, because you want to give the vaccine time to work. And if there's anything the providers want to add to that, I'll let them clean it up.
No, I agree. Exactly. Yeah. So don't risk it. Go ahead and get number 2 unless you've had some significant adverse effect. You know, we had one patient in our clinic. We've been administering Moderna in our practice for our patients, and we've had one patient who had a moderate slash severe allergic reaction. He's fine now. He's recovered, but he also had been previously infected by COVID-19. So who knows if there's some relation there, but he decided personally, he decided to not get shot number 2, because he just didn't feel comfortable doing so. And we have to respect that. But the hope is that with that, at least that one shot, he has, I've heard different numbers, but maybe about 70%-ish protection instead of the full 90+% effectiveness with both vaccines. So hopefully he was able and is able to keep some of that protection. I mean, certainly the ideal would be for him to get number 2, but if he didn't tolerate it, then you can't force it. But always get both shots as much as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Spiner. Now, a follow-up question to this is, how long after the second dose in general will the vaccine be more effective? And I'll open this to anyone.
Aubrey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm told between 10 to 14 days after the shot, you should expect pretty strong immunity.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the time frame for the peak of it. And then the question we're still trying to answer is how long. We're still collecting immunogenicity samples on patients as we speak. And so we're going to continue to follow these patients up to 2 years long, and we'll see whether or not the science says that, at least for even a subset of patients, they remain immune for longer periods of time.
So I think maybe I'll jump in on this to say that I don't know the answer, but in a lot of the places that I've been, it appears that people don't know the answer. And it's also difficult to know the answer because it's a very complicated bunch of people who are going around and you don't know. Actually, I should say that's why we went through the effort to go and build the NOVID system. Because I am this network theory researcher. Back in March, which is hard to believe, it's almost a year ago, the idea was we would have no way to actually seriously answer this question unless we have data. And so what we ended up making is we found a way to make an app that people actually wanted to install because it would give them a radar to help them defend themselves. This is actually an important detail. This is what I've been talking to a lot of people about these days. Unfortunately, for a long time, people were talking about making apps which were primarily focused around controlling the user. Basically telling the user that you have already been exposed. It's now potentially too late for you. You should now stay home to protect everyone else from you. And unfortunately, people didn't want that. But then what we made is we said, look, what if you flip all the incentives? What if you can make an app that people can use like a radar system that they don't have to do anything about, but with which most people would actually want to use to protect themselves? Suddenly, what we have found out is people actually want the app. If you think about it, who wouldn't want to know if a hurricane is coming? You want to know. And then suddenly what this is giving us is it's giving us a very large base of anonymized information, because we're not doing this to sell advertisements. That's not what we care about. But we're using this to understand that there are some anonymous people who are interacting with each other. Some of them are getting sick. Some of them are getting dose 1 of Moderna at this date. Some of them are getting dose 2 of Pfizer at that date. In fact, the whole reason why we built this is to be able to answer that question. And sadly, I actually don't know any other way to answer that question in a way that takes into account all of these human interactions. So I think it's actually a really legitimate question that you've asked. And it's because we didn't see any great ways to answer this on a real population scale, as opposed to a trial where you follow specific people. We saw that this was necessary.
Thank you for your input, Poe. That's actually really interesting because, like you said, we have all these different factors. We don't know, what exactly is happening. We are seeing science unfold in real time. Really interesting that you bring up your app. Just real quick, could you tell everyone, how to download the app and how it works? Is there anything that they need to be worried about? I know that you mentioned privacy. I know that that's something really important to your app as well. So.
Sure. Actually, I should also say the way that our app works is it works best when the region is also collaborating with us. So for example, it's being used at several universities right now, because at some point, whenever there are positive cases, there needs to be a way that people can't just arbitrarily report positive cases without having some coordination with the local authorities. So I'm actually not here to say that everyone should download this app, because your region might not be collaborating with us yet. On the other hand, the app exists. If you go to the Google or the Apple and type in NOVID, you'll find it and it's free. But the real purpose of why I'm going around talking about it is because it's a totally new philosophy to try to attack a disease that coexists with every other strategy you've got and basically amplifies everything else that you're doing. And so if there are people on this call who happen to be those regional authorities and want to have a further discussion, then we could actually easily make this thing work. Regarding privacy, again, the important thing is I'm a scientist. I did not start this to sell advertisements. And so the way we did it is that when you install the app, it doesn't ask you for your name or your email address or your phone number. The only reason anyone asks you for those is because they want to sell you something, but we don't. And so it automatically, when you're walking around, the apps communicate to each other and they share information like my user ID is 50,236,172. That's it.
Thank you, Po. And that's really, really similar to clinical trials and how people are protected, right? And Aubrey, please feel free to jump in and talk a little bit more about what it means to be in this blinded study, what it means with placebos, and most importantly, how were people, well, you did talk a little bit about how people were protected. So could you tell us a little more about just what it means to be blinded and unblinded in a clinical trial study?
Yeah, absolutely. So blinded, it sounds like exactly what it is. The patient does not know, participant does not know what treatment they received at that specific period of time. It also means that the person administering the drug, or we'll say the physician monitoring the patient, does not in fact know at that time what the patient received. So that's the definition of blinded, so to speak, in a clinical trial setting. A placebo is made to mimic the active drug, but does not have any active ingredients. So it might match it in color, in texture, and so forth, but it does not have active ingredients. Why is this done? Well, that's a whole nother topic. But in short, in fact, maybe the biostatistician could answer that. But in short, it's meant to protect the data, right? To take the human out of it, so to speak. We don't want to be biased in how we look at the data. The beauty of these studies is we recognize from an ethical standpoint, these participants need to be protected. And so we have this crossover design that patients initially that got placebo will eventually get the study drug, especially if we have evidence to show that the study drug is effective. And so that's a great reason. It's actually a great resource for the community to consider being involved in clinical trials. I think I just heard a statistic of 1 million people right here in just Wake County. Conversely, Wake Research has enrolled about 2,500 subjects. So there's more room. We're starting another clinical trial in just a couple of weeks for a COVID vaccine that's being conducted internationally. And so that may very well be a way or an opportunity for those who are most at risk to get a vaccine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aubrey. That is another opportunity for people to get the vaccine as they're sitting here in the waiting period. Commissioner Cervania, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add the past two questions. So, there's also, I'm going to put on my old hat of working in clinical research to say there's added protections. That's why, I know Aubrey had mentioned it a little bit, but there's so many added protections when it comes to clinical trials. And so, when it, in the news, we've heard about Johnson & Johnson, having to pull back, and have to refocus their research. So, I hope people do participate. This is the way you directly can find out how effective these vaccines can be for the rest of the communities all over the world, right? So I'm glad that you all are doing this work, and it's so very important. I want to also go back to the vaccines at an individual level. until we can get at least 70-90% vaccinated, we still need to be very cognizant of how to protect ourselves, right? And we like Ho had said, some people might be at first dose Pfizer or second dose Moderna. Like, it's all over the place, and especially during this time. So we need to make sure that people like take the responsibility of taking both their doses. But even if they don't, there's still a little percent that you may get it. Having the vaccine will protect. Research has shown that your symptoms would be less virulent if you go through the vaccine protocol. But we have to also remind people, you still need to wear a mask. You need to still be socially distanced, washing your hands until mostly all of us can get this vaccine.
Thank you, Commissioner Cervania. That is an absolutely important thing to remember, is even with us personally getting vaccinated, we still need to consider the people around us, especially those who are immunocompromised or at higher risk of contracting this virus. Now, this question is a little, I think, more so directed to you, but also, other panelists can join in as well. I know you just mentioned we're kind of all over the place with scheduling, especially we have attendees from all over the country. Is there a timeline? Is there an idea for any of us, the general public who do not belong to a high risk group? Is there a timeline that we can anticipate getting this vaccine?
Is this question?
It's really open-ended. I know it's kind of impossible to answer, but is there a timeline as far as getting this rolled out to the general public?
Like I can't swear in my life of a timeline. That's all. I will say this is all of us have a responsibility, right? And from all of the different people who are in this call, like, we're at a different place when it comes to making an impact when it comes to that timeline. We're gonna really actually have to see what our federal government, our research and people, and our pharmaceutical companies, like where they're all gonna be at. Not only in the efficacy, but logistics, with the money, like I wish I could tell people, like guaranteed we're all gonna be at this time, right? But again, I have to hearken on the fact that we need to be patient and really come to other forums like this and talking to our leaders and our direct medical providers and our people who are trying to get more information out to answer that question as time goes by. Like I say, it changes every day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Swiner, please.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I mean, the number, everything changes day to day, minute by minute, hour by hour, et cetera. But I'm a big fan of Dr. Fauci. And so I trust what he says. And at some point, he has reported that hopefully by June-ish, summer-ish, that all who want the shot can get the shot or will have access to the shot. So don't quote me on that. Dr. Fauci said it. I'm sure he would say don't quote him on that either. But my hope is that he is able to predict and can say that hopefully by early summer, all of us who want the shot will have access to the shot. So fingers crossed for a fun summer with masks.
Watch out for that tan lines, right?
Well, I'm gonna add, actually, just to let you all know where we're at, so it gives people a gauge. Sorry, Abby, to interrupt again. So oh gosh, we started February 19th with group 1, which was our health professionals, right? And then or maybe it was a little before that, and then like our 65 and older, it went from 75 and older to 65 and older in those same around times. There had, like, that population encompassed about, like 75,000 people, maybe less, I should say. And we only have about 7,500 people left in that grouping. So, we're aware March, no, we're still February 22nd, right? Yeah, so we're moving along relatively quickly. The determinants also, if you all don't know, is that we get supply dependent on how many shots we put in arms. So we have to be very much like, active in terms of the supply we get into as many arms as possible in the shortest period of time. So it's sort of like, proving that we are an effective facilitator of providing shots. So, like now we're going to start group 3A, which is on Wednesday, and there's a few thousand people. I think it's 5,000 in Wake County, or probably more really, but that's the pacing. And I didn't do this math ahead of time, but we're getting through them quite quickly. Just to let you all know. So June might be realistic, but I'm not going to be here to be quoted on that either. Please don't quote me on that.
We're being hopeful here, right? Now, with that on that note, with Wake County, I know this will be, your answer will be specific to Wake County public health, might be different for even Dr. Swiner, but do people get to, what is Wake County public health? Which vaccines are you distributing? And do people get a choice on which vaccine they would receive?
So currently we only have Pfizer. In Wake County, with Wake County Public Health, but we have other providers providing vaccines through the other health systems like Wake Med, Rex. So I can't speak for them either. Moderna is online but we don't know when that will be. So I'm not sure where we're at when it comes to choice, but at this choice, you only have one choice, and it's Pfizer. Here through Wake County. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Swiner, I think I heard you mention Moderna in your practice, correct?
Yeah, yes, and it all depends. It all depends where you are located and what system you're affiliated with and what they have access to. As a medical provider, our office is affiliated loosely with Wake Med, and Wake Med primarily had Pfizer for its employees and its healthcare providers. However, for patients, we have more Moderna. So it all depends where you're located, whose list you're on, who calls you first. My advice to all my patients is get what you can get and sign up for everybody's list. So sign up at your pharmacy, sign up at your doctors, go to your health department, and then whoever calls you first, you just go and get the shot.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Swiner. And Po, you are actually the one that stands out. All of us are over here in North Carolina. You are in Pennsylvania, correct? Do you have any input on what are you hearing? Do you hear people receiving one over the other?
So honestly, unfortunately, I looked at the list of where I am on this list of when I'm going to get a shot, and I was so far down that I actually don't follow what is going to happen before, because by the time it gets to me, the situation is going to be different. Although I do know, I'm subscribed to our county alerts. I know that we're taking this extremely seriously, and we're opening up these various vaccination clinics to people in the wider community. At least the way it is over here, it's probably the same over there. You can register online for an appointment and so on. And so I know that we're taking this very seriously. I just don't know the brands.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Po. Now we are getting a little short on time, and unfortunately, Aubrey from Wake Research was disconnected, but we did receive a very important question pertaining to the clinical trials, which Aubrey had provided for us. One of the common questions we received is, if Pfizer and Moderna are already received FDA approval, why are clinical trials still necessary? And the question that Aubrey provided is that there is no possible way for one single company to develop enough vaccines for all of the population. I know that I think Commissioner Cervania and Dr. Swiner, and maybe Po as well, you can chime in and talk about the way that things are stored, the doses that you receive and whatnot. But the general answer as to why clinical trials are still needed is we are going to need different vaccines from different sponsors. Did anyone want to jump in on that and make additional comments? Dr. Swiner, yeah?
I'm sorry, like Commissioner wanted to say something. I mean, so yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's no way that one company is going to be able to be responsible for all of the people globally. I mean, this is a global pandemic. So I like that we have different ones. I like that we have multiple companies working on this problem. I was a little concerned about Johnson & Johnson at first because it was 1 shot versus 2 doses, but the research is showing that it's greatly effective. And for those of my patients who are a little bit more hesitant and reluctant at this point, I think having the 1 shot dose is gonna encourage them to go ahead and get the shot a little bit more than maybe taking the 2. So, I like that we will have many options to choose from, and it'll, I think, make our patients more comfortable to have those available.
Awesome. Thank you. Commissioner Cervania, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add, Dr. Swiner was perfect in the response. And like the different ones, and Aubrey can probably answer this better than I, but I will just say, so Pfizer and Moderna are of a different platform. It's based on mRNA, which actually, we've had SARS for several decades. And so that's why that was probably online much quicker, because that basic platform was already established, and an upper layer was added to make sure it addresses COVID-19 in particular. And Johnson & Johnson and NOVID, those are based on a different platform, and not mRNA. And so that's why it's a different process, a different research, clinical trial, all of that different way. I'm going to go back to Moderna and Pfizer. Yes, logistically, it's very much of a challenge because they need to be stored minus 40 degrees and Moderna is a little better. I think they're a little minus 30 degrees, or a little hot, but still all very logistically challenging. I actually went through our PNC mass vaccination process, and really, even though they need to be cold stored, they can last in any one of their stages between 2 hours or so, depending on what part of it, and it can last a certain amount of months when it's still in its original form. But you'll hear sometimes at events, we have leftover, we need to get it in people's arms. Yeah, they can only last a certain amount of time. So that doesn't mean people are cutting in line. Usually there's like a list of healthcare providers, which is group 1, on tap to take that extra dosing of an event. So yeah, appointment only. That's been proven to be the best way, at least here in Wake County, to make sure that we don't have angry people in lines who don't end up getting their shots at that same day. And I also would want to remind people, when they get their appointments, you don't have to show up 1 or 2 hours ahead of time. Come in your window period of time, and it's been going so quickly and so smoothly. And there's an observation area after you take your shot. So there's people, EMS, medical staff, who are taking care of you after your shot to make sure that no adverse effects are happening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Bo.
I just thought I would throw in another angle also. Again, I'm actually not, I'm not a medical professional, but as a mathematician, when we look at these and you see the numbers of people around the world which are getting infected by this, and if you think about what evolution does and what natural selection do with regard to evolving variants which have different characteristics, it's actually really important that we have an arsenal of different types of vaccines and treatments and even non-pharmaceutical approaches, because it's actually evolving pretty fast. I mean, actually, the things that I worry about, because I'm working on this from the non-pharmaceutical angle, we're always thinking, how big of a problem is this? And the things that we're seeing are that there are evolving strains which are starting to make it a little bit more difficult to control in the old-fashioned way. So I think it's really important for humanity to not put all eggs in one basket. And the notion that we got Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they already work, let's put all the eggs there. There are 7 to 8 billion people on this planet. We can't possibly put all the eggs that way. The work that Wake Research is doing and all of the different researchers and all of the different people coming up with solutions, we've got to keep working.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Po. It's really interesting how mathematics is really playing a role in how this pandemic is fought. We have time for one more question, and I'm going to address this to Aubrey since this is another common one. And again, it's actually a two-part question. What is the timeline for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and what is the timeline for immunizations for children?
Yes, two great questions. Johnson & Johnson is contacting us every day, and I'm sure they are for many sites across the nation about their data. So anytime the FDA, before FDA reviews a clinical trial, we have to make sure the data is clean and accurate. And so that requires data entry, requires query resolution, making sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And so we're in that stage now of providing them a final data packet, so to speak, electronically, and then they'll sift through it. Their biostatisticians will get to work. So we're hoping perhaps even in the next 30 days or so, if the efficacy is there, that they'll move forward with a submission, but that's left to be seen. And there was a second part to that question. I'm sorry.
No worries. What is the timeline for children getting vaccinated?
That's another great question.
Developing.
We are actually, so Pfizer has already opened the door, so to speak, in protocol amendments to including children in their vaccine. And the way that works is we start at a higher age, probably 12 to 17, and then slowly work their way down. That's obviously a very sensitive topic. Between children. So initially, we need to make sure for a certainty that the data we have for the Johnson and the Novavax are in fact show the safety and efficacy and get approved potentially. And then no doubt those will open up to children. They also need to fine-tune dosing and things of that nature. So it isn't on the forefront of the agenda. We've done a number of feasibilities for clinical trials specifically in children for vaccine. And what we'll encourage the public to do is visit clinicaltrials.gov to take an overall look of what the clinical trial landscape looks like for pediatrics. But we are looking to be involved in that space, if not at our Raleigh location at one of our sites nationwide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aubrey. Now we are wrapping up. So if any of the panelists would like to share any final thoughts, we have a lot of unanswered questions that we didn't get through the whole list. So we're hoping to host another webinar again. But in the meantime, do any of our panelists want to share your last thoughts? Aubrey, you're on my speaker screen, so you can go ahead and anything else you want to say.
Well, first, I just want to say a thank you to all the individuals that have volunteered to participate in clinical trials and that, got our nation to where we're at now currently with 2 approved vaccines. Yes, the rollout is slower than what we would like, but it is happening and lives are being saved. So, their braveness, their courageousness, is worthy of our thanks. And, we can't say that enough. In addition to our clinical staff and team that have worked extremely hard, our thanks goes to them as well. The healthcare professionals, the other STEM professionals that have contributed to the science, we're so grateful to you, and we appreciate you taking your time to collaborate with us in addressing this issue. And, nothing but thanks to the work that has been done and will continue to go on until we're fully past this pandemic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aubrey. Thank you for your time. Dr. Swiner?
Continue being safe out there. Don't forget your 3 W's, even if you've had the vaccine, and remain hopeful. I posted on social media that the 2 biggest side effects I got from the shots, the 2 Pfizer vaccine doses that I got, were hope and optimism. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the good things and the positive outcomes that we'll get globally from having these vaccines available and us continuing to do the right things and protecting each other. So y'all be safe.
Thank you, Dr. Swiner. Thank you for your time and your input. Po?
Yeah, so I want to say again, thanks for having me on this panel. Very interesting for me. Every panel I learned from the other panelists. But something maybe as a closing thought for people who are watching this, I would just like to, maybe unfortunately it's not as happy, but I want to say, even after you get vaccinated, please be careful. It's a little bit dangerous if people have the idea that I'm just going to get this and I'm done, and now I won't get sick, so I can go and do anything. I'm actually a behavioral incentives person, so that's actually how we even came up with our intervention. The one thing I'm hoping is that people don't say, now that I can't get sick, I'll go around and do all of these things. So please don't. Please still be compassionate and realize that there are many other people out there who might not have gotten the shot yet. And the behavior that you take is going to help protect their lives too.
Absolutely, very important. Thank you so much, Po. Thank you for your time. And last but not least, Commissioner Cervania.
Yeah, I want to reiterate again, thank you so much for inviting all of us to this panel and be able to have a conversation and provide information to the community here and all over the world. It's out there all over the county. Thank you for the work of Wake Research, and it's going to be pivotal in how we go forward. But you know, I also wanted to add, and it's been a common thread and theme, relationships and conversations and communications is actually even sometimes more impactful than you know the science of this all. We we need to keep those conversations going, because this is going to be the way to get more vaccine, to get it more timely, to make sure that they're effectively working for everybody, and that the right people at the right time get it. And that means everybody, really. And that it is a smooth experience, like some have been. And we didn't even talk about the marginalized communities, is that there's been history that's been really bad. I know Aubrey had touched on Tuskegee, but you know, like with Henrietta Lacks and other, you know, groups like the Latino community, Asian community, African American community, we've had really not so great experiences when it comes to research and science sometimes. So, but you see us all here, you know, and there's many other of us who are trying to make this as safe as possible for every community. So like, I just, as everyone said, keep safe. Don't think you can party or like do other things in this near future until we're all vaccinated and all safe from this. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Cervania. Thank you all to our attendees for taking the time to join us. And thank you to every single one of our panelists who is doing something really, really significant in their own communities and are making a great impact in fighting this pandemic. Again, this webinar is recorded, so please keep an eye out. In the next 24 hours. We will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording, as well as a link to the resources that our panelists have provided. And with everything else, we hope that you all have a wonderful day. Please stay safe and please keep an eye out for information about vaccines. Again, we want to continue these webinars. We want to continue answering questions. We know that we didn't get through all of them today. So again, please keep an eye out for a follow-up email on when that may be. All right, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful Monday.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Abby. Good work.
Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you, Abby. Wonderful work.
Thank you, Maria.
Great. You're a great moderator. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Po. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.